In this tutorial, we'll look at distortion and how you can use Waveshaper to make sounds like this. Distortion is one of those effects that's widely used but often misunderstood. Let's explore the Waveshaper display. I'll be using a saw wave. The graph shows input on the horizontal axis and output on the vertical axis. By changing this graph, you can distort the input waveform. In bipolar mode, you can shape the waveform above and below the zero crossing independently. In unipolar mode, the graph affects both the upper and lower half of the waveform. When the waveform lies along the middle of the display like this, input equals output, so there's no distortion. Along the bottom, use Pre to set the input level to the correct part of the distortion envelope. To help, this vertical line is a peak meter. It shows you where the input signal reaches. Mix is useful for comparing the pre and post distorted sound, or to blend in just the right amount. Post is an output level. Snap is useful for snapping the envelope to the grid. And we have an envelope menu here. So what's distortion? It's any change to a waveform shape compared to the original. Historically, musically useful distortion came from malfunctioning or abused analog hardware. Valves in amplifiers, then later transistors and tape were all sources of this distortion. Let's create some of these analog distortions with Waveshaper. I'll swap to a sine wave as it's easier to hear the effects on a clean tone. Valve distortion is highly prized by some. Here's a valve from FL Studio's audio engine. One purpose of valves in amplifiers is to turn a small amount of current, the signal, into a large current, the output to the speaker. One characteristic of valves is the way they distort input signals when it approaches and exceeds the maximum output limit. This distortion is known as soft clipping. Soft clipping rolls off the top of the waveform. As we approach the maximum input, the output can no longer keep up and starts to sag, producing the characteristic soft clipping shape. Soft clipping is often the basis of warming plugins. The next step is transistor clipping distortion. Transistors are the modern equivalent of valves. This is a much harder rounding off, but it's still softer than digital clipping, which we can do like this. Notice how the clipping is inaudible until I drive the input into the clipped range of the envelope. You can also use this to your advantage, for example, by using velocity to change the input level and exercising different parts of the curve. All good stuff. Another type of distortion highly prized by music producers is crossover distortion. This relates to the way the waveform transitions from positive to negative and back at the zero crossing point. It turns out that bad or malfunctioning valve amplifiers typically result in crossover distortion errors. Tape recorders can also do this when the bias is either not working or set incorrectly. In any case, it sounds like this. High crossover distortion is a key component of the distorted guitar sound. For example, let's play this guitar recording. First try. Now with some soft saturation. Next, let's add some typical crossover distortion. And finally, heavy crossover distortion. I hope this tutorial has demystified Waveshaper and some common distortion types. Next time you hear producers talking about analog warmth, you can be pretty sure it's some combination of soft saturation and crossover distortion. Until next time, enjoy distorting waveforms with Fruity Waveshaper.